Dr. Pressman, thank you so much for being with me here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
It is such a joy. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, and what a great space to share the same virtual space for a while at least.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just jump in. How did you decide to get into mental health?
Oh, I'm sure if I dig deep, it's because, I have a colorful family and I
Right.
was just curious how we all got to be who we are.
Right.
Um, but also I really loved theater. And I think what I realized I loved about it was just obsessively being curious about the inner workings of the mind of others. And so the part of mental health that I'm in is developmental psychology, which
Yes.
really is quite different than a clinical lens. It's truly how we come to be who we are, um, not pathology and psychopathology. So it's not that that wasn't part of my training, but it's just a different pair of glasses. Like that's how I
Yes.
view it. It's just a different lens.
Sure. Oh, that's so wonderful. Okay, I'm gonna have to go on a tangent. Tell me a little bit about theater. Which were your favorite shows?
Oh, I mean, I was such a dorky kid. Like I was obsessed with Shakespeare. I don't even know how
Amazing.
to explain myself. And then like it's totally unrelatable and weird. I had this teacher when I was in seventh grade because I went to see Shakespeare in the park and I thought it was so incredible. And it was like in the Central Park in New York City, and there was just all these people watching free theater, and you stand in line and then get your tickets, and then people perform, and there are all these. It was just so cool. So I got really into it, and I thought it was really interesting from both literature and like performance. And I just got so into it. And Shakespeare was very much like a psychologist.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's so much behind each one of those plays, so that makes absolute sense, and it's nice to see. I'm glad. Yeah, that's really very, very cool.
It's so
Uh,
unrelatable now though. So I don't even like I don't even really think about it much, but now I try to take my kids to the theater all the time, but we see like fun musicals and stuff.
yes, more like Hamilton or
And Hamilton, yeah.
yes, I like all of it, right? Love play, a straight play, musical,
Yeah.
older stuff, newer stuff. I was obsessed with The Sound of Music, Julie Andrews
Yeah.
growing up. But yeah, I'm the same way about being kind of a strange child. Like I was really into Matlock and Murder She Wrote in elementary school.
That's amazing.
And it's like, why was I predisposed to being interested in murder? I don't know.
Who knows? But it's just like if you're fascinated by humans, it
Hmm.
makes sense to just get really into people who find ways to get you inside the minds of humans in
That's
different kind
right.
of ways.
That's
So I
right.
think
That's
that's
absolutely right.
why.
Yeah. So I know I saw that you've got your master's in risk resilience and prevention, which I have to admit my ignorance. I didn't even know was a thing that a person could study. How did you get there?
Well, so the program, so I was in a PhD program that was focused on developmental psychology. And
Yes.
within that, there was a special separate program that was developmental psychopathology, which is
Yes.
not really a field that is outside of academia at all.
Hmm.
But essentially, the kind of founder of that field, there were two of them. One of them was my advisor at the time, Sunia Luthar, who's no longer. She died, I think, in February of last year, sadly.
Wow.
But she and a guy named Dante Cicchetti really took developmental psychology and clinical psychology and essentially just like married them.
Wow.
And so it was really interesting. But risk resilience and prevention, I was just so excited by because it was kind of trying to understand who's at greatest risk.
Hmm. Hmm.
And of those folks who are at greatest risk, why does some of them come out bouncing back and resilient, and why does some not thrive?
Yeah.
And then prevention, of course, is like once we have that information, what can we do to pump the water with all of the stuff that makes it a little bit easier to bounce back?
Hmm. I found it. I actually went to teachers college and was Googling like I was like, I need to know more about this. Like, that's so fascinating to me. So you were in your PhD program and then we're like, I'm going to go ahead and grab my master's while I'm at it.
Yeah, why not?
I love it. I honestly have had this conversation with people before. I think if I could just be a lifelong student, I'm always so
Totally.
curious and fascinated to learn more about so many things that I don't know about.
I agree. I really could take everything, but like I would love to not have to take tests or write papers anymore.
That's the thing. The especially the test part. And it's been interesting too. Sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's been interesting with Chat GPT and AI that we're having to come up with new assignments, because really
Oh, right.
you
Right.
can't just say like write this paper on this thing, because someone will be like write a paper on this thing.
Boom. I think it's kind of interesting and it requires like some creativity, obviously, on the, we have to design curriculum in a different way, but, or measure how you're doing in a different way. On the other hand, kind of like the idea that maybe people will have to use the Socratic method more and speak a little bit more about what they're thinking on this, I just
Yes.
think it could be very cool.
Yes. Yeah. And it is one of the favorite things that I have to do is love to do is have my students teach a class. So they all have to get in group work and they have to lead part of the lecture, and they all panic in the beginning and then they all do a really beautiful job. And yeah, it's pretty nice. So anyway, sorry for the tangent, but that just made me
No.
think of that piece that we've been kind of delving into. So for perhaps maybe the 2 or 3 people who are listening to my show who don't know that you have a show, I would love if you could just give a little backstory. How did you get into it? How did you decide this is what I want to start doing? Just a little info for everyone.
Oh, sure. So I have a podcast called Raising Good Humans, which I started because a few years ago, I think it's been 4 years.
Mm,
Um, I never had listened to podcasts before. My work had nothing to do with podcasts, but um, the producers of my podcast and a bunch of others was called Dear Media, and they were starting a podcast platform with female um, podcasters, like topics that were more for uh, females and female identifiers. And
yeah.
so they hit all the spaces except for parenting. And so I just was connected with them, and someone told me that I was doing it. And I kind of, that's how it happened. It was really, I was like, what? And it was supposed to be kind of live sessions with parents to help challenging situations. And then somehow I just felt like, oh, this is an opportunity to reach lots of people and engage all these amazing experts that I come
Mm,
across in this field and that don't typically get to speak to parents,
mhm.
or practitioners or whoever's listening. So that ended up being much more fun for me.
Yeah, that's again, I would love to be a lifelong learner. And so I'm always trying to find the new people who can come on and increase my wealth of knowledge. It's wonderful.
I feel the same way. Like I love this part of my job, which I don't even think of as my job. I feel like it's this extra fun thing that I get to do.
Hmm.
Just
Hmm.
is, I always get excited, even speaking with colleagues that I've known for decades, but I've
Hmm.
just never had those kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
It's so cool. And you always learn something.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so tell me, I know kind of talking about raising good humans and the parenting, like how do we help people shift? I have a lot of clients, a lot of friends. When I became a mother, like there's so much judgment. The Pinterest mom, which I don't know, I don't use Pinterest, but like bless them because they have that stigma. But the Pinterest mom, the social media, it's kind of a default state of mind to go to judgment, or I wouldn't do that, or this is what I would do. How do you help people through the show and through all the other work that we'll get into? Like, how do we help people shift away from the judgmental space in the parenting world?
I mean, it's such a fine balance because you want to grow as a parent.
Hmm.
It's totally reasonable to find out that you have to raise humans and then want to learn more. But not so much that I think if you're listening to any voices where you feel like I'm now not worthy as a parent, you have to turn the volume down. And for some people, it's going to be a voice that other people feel soothed by. So, I mean, I hope people would turn my voice down if it makes them feel less than. So I think part of it is on us, like accepting that if there is any sense of unworthiness, which, I mean, there's always a little bit of unworthiness or we wouldn't be people, but
Sure.
if if you're feeling more unworthy when you are listening to something, turn it off.
Hmm.
And, because it's one thing to help parents question things and come
Hmm.
up with what works best for them, given the science, given their own values, given their children's temperaments, given their own temperaments. But it's a whole other thing if parents are seeking out the one answer to make this all better, because
Hmm.
it's not there. Like, I
Hmm.
know people sell it a lot, but it's not real science.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. I mean, I try to say just turn down the noise that makes you feel noticeably more unworthy than usual, and
Hmm.
turn up the voices that help you feel like you're given tools that can help support you
Hmm.
as like, I mean, in the way that we're meant to be autonomy supportive parents,
Hmm.
I want to be autonomy supportive for parents.
Oh, absolutely. And that's really a lovely thing to think about too, the difference between like parenting guilt versus shame is one category of I made a choice, I raised my voice at my child, let me take that energy and make a different choice in the future versus the shame, I'm no longer worthy as a parent,
Right.
I am bad, I am a bad person. And then the other piece of that entirely, which is getting rid of both of those and just saying like, oh, hey, I didn't know you could do that. That's
Cool.
something new for my tool belt. Move on. And
Yeah.
not making that necessarily about you as a parent, but like, this is what I'm going to do now.
Yeah, I mean, we all started being parents when we became parents. So like none of it, that's it. Like we're born the same day, the kids are born. So it's not like
Yeah.
we go to graduate school on parenting and then we become parents. And so we're kind of all, myself included, doing our best and winging it much of the time. I just have the anchor for me, and it makes me feel better, of some science. But
Mhm.
it's not like science has every answer. And I think the other thing that's driven parents a little crazy is that the science does have some foundational, pretty reliable and valid content. And
Mhm.
then there's like minutia that we've decided to fixate on, as if like exactly how you start solids, or exactly,
Yes.
what you say to your kids when their friend was mean to them is science, and
Mm.
it's, like cut and dry. It's like you can pull from the science that relationships and, you know, the connection and the boundaries is what's super healthy. So that means when you're responding to your child, you can pull those things and get not scripted, but just like some sense of validating a feeling and then holding the behavior accountable. But
Mhm.
it's not like somebody did a study on every one of the minutia moments that are out there on social media or out there on Pinterest or wherever. It's sort of interpretive. And so we have to also let go of some of the minutia, because it's definitely driving parents totally bonkers.
Yes, and as one of those parents, I feel bonkers is a great way to describe how I feel. So
Bonkers is my professional way of describing it.
yes, that is absolutely, it's a diagnostic criteria has been met over here. Yes, but that's right. I mean, it's there are so many voices, and I celebrate that to an extent when at 3 o'clock in the morning I can pull up my phone and Google something and be like, oh, that's totally common. You don't need to go to the emergency department or whatever that
Right.
looked like.
Then it's helpful.
And it's so helpful as opposed to when I was born in the 80s, but then also very much the pendulum swings the other way of too much information. You have to start solid at this time. You can't start solid at this time. Has to be this food. It can't be that food. And it's just, it's a lot. And you mentioned earlier, like, what are the voices that are the most helpful? The ones that provide you the information, but don't make you feel like, don't have you internalizing that in some way. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's going to be different for everyone.
Hmm.
Like we all get set off by certain things and really ignited by things, positively ignited. And so it's just figuring out what makes sense for you. I mean, my Achilles heel is that I'm so like, well, on the one hand, on the other hand, and sometimes parents are like, just tell me what to do.
Yes.
Um, like I had clients who were in an argument about their toddler crying in the crib,
Hmm.
and they wanted me to sort of give them the right answer, quote
Yes.
unquote. And I said, well, giving you the right answer would be fake news because there's no science behind whether or not one of you thinks 10 minutes is the right time and one of you thinks 20 and what is the right decision. So they were like, okay, well, then give us the fake news. Just tell us exactly what to do right now because it's annoying to have to make this decision. And I said, okay, I will. As a mother and somebody who's been around a little bit more in this, I'm happy to give you an answer. I just didn't want to like
Yeah.
tell you something that you then decided was like somehow gospel.
Yes.
And they were like, you're so and I realized like for some parents, it's probably more relaxing to just be told exactly what to do. And that if that relaxes you, great. But if
Yes.
it doesn't, know that that is just for some people really helpful.
Mhm.
And for others, it is simply debilitating.
Yes. It, that just the same as there are no two babies that are the same.
Yeah.
This all falls in the same line of thought because you're absolutely right. That's interesting too. You made me think of clients who will come in and just be like, well, just tell me what to do. And I'm like, look, if I were omniscient, I'd be living on a yacht in Mallorca with Beyonce right now. Like, you're the expert in your life. I'm just asking questions.
Yeah. It's really hard for some people to hear that, but
Mm.
I think you can end up on a yacht with Beyonce if you capitalize on the need for that.
Yeah.
But then I feel like I really want people to feel armed so
Yes.
that they can make decisions where they're not feeling like they need the answer. I think we can be here for people,
Yes.
but also it's nice to feel like, okay, if I'm not here, just like we want with our kids, which
Hmm.
is they have to make a decision and they're like, well, I can't ask mom right now, but what feels right in my core? What feels like this is what's that voice going to sound like? What's my inner voice? And that's
Hmm.
how they fly. So I don't know. That's where I land on that.
Yes. That is such a good point. And the parallel to our children as well, because you're right. I can tell you, here's your checklist and go, but I'm on my yacht with Beyonce now and I'm not available anymore. So the decision fatigue remains.
Yeah.
Right. And so it has to be in a space where you can have these conversations, but also know that it works within your value system, your awareness, all of the things. And then, of course, too, to your specific children or child, because even my two kids are wholly different in so many ways. And they have the same sperm and egg, like same
Right.
DNA. So
Living in the same house.
living in the same house with the same experiences. So yeah,
How old are your kids?
they are 2 and 4.
Oh, I
Yes.
mean, also that's really hard
It is
ages.
wild times over here, and my husband travels a lot for work, and we don't have family because we moved here at the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yes, it's been a whole journey. And so that's another reason I talked to Dr. Heitner, who has also been on your show, and
Uh-huh.
her episode's already launched on mine. And I asked my husband, I was like, was I asking too many personal questions about myself? I felt like I was almost going for a free therapy session. He was like, I don't think anybody will think that, but
No, but I also think like if you have that question, if I have that question, chances are everybody has
it's
these
so
questions.
true. I do not live in a vacuum. I am not, I mean, my mother thinks I'm special, but I am not special. I'm not individualized. Like the things that concern me are the things that concern my clients, that concern my pals, my students who are parents who will randomly grab me after class or something. So yeah, it's a balance though of not being like, so my daughter is 2 and blah, 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 but also I know everyone
Yeah.
else is thinking it.
I know. I mean,
Yeah,
we are
so I wanted
unique,
to
but not that unique.
yeah, right, right. Like I am my own special person, but also I know y'all feel me.
Yeah,
So I wanted to pivot a little bit. You wrote a book.
I did.
I am so excited to read it. Comes out in January. We will of course have all of that in the show notes. But tell me like where was the spark for the idea for the 5 principles of parenting?
Well, I felt, first of all, I was never going to write a book because I felt like there are too many brilliant books out there,
Yes.
and nobody has time to read all of these books, and I don't want to add to everybody's stress. But then I thought, like a lot of times people ask, and so I was like, you know what? If I write a book, I want it to be sort of a catch-all that's like, what do you absolutely need to know
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
science? And if you want to go into like specialty stuff, then there are a gazillion books out there. But like, if you just need one book where you're just like, what is the science that really matters for moving the needle for our kids
Hmm.
and for ourselves? And then how does that look in the real world developmentally? So
Hmm.
I kind of separated it. The first half is the science of child development, and the second half is how that translates in common everyday transitions and experiences that most parents talk to me about. And then I went through infancy through adolescence to sort of give examples for each so that you finally realize or believe, I hope, that you can be fluent in a very small bit of the science, these
Mm.
5 principles, and you can see with practice, and I did it over and over in the book, how they keep applying, whether there's a baby or a toddler or a teenager. And I did use individual circumstances because I know that it's hard to translate these things into your everyday parenting. But I'm hoping that after enough time practicing in the book, it just becomes fluent and nobody needs anything anymore. But that was kind of the idea. And also, I just learned that some people listen to podcasts, some people like reading books, some people don't like talking, and we're all just different learners. And so I wanted to have a book for the people who just want something in one place that they can just reference. And
Yes.
it's probably not a read all at once kind of book anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think if you are having a baby, it's nice to sort of get yourself grounded in what you feel work will be sort of your North Star of parenting.
Yes.
So ideally, you're pregnant and you're like, you know what, I've got time right now. I'm going to read this. But I think you could have a 13-year-old and get the same things. It's just
Hmm.
so anyway, that's what started it. And then I wanted to figure out 5 principles because I wanted it to be like, what is enough that is that you can remember? It's not so much that you can't
Yes.
remember, but it's enough that it actually makes change and affects change. And
Yes.
so I really just looked at the research and felt like, what do we absolutely have to include here that leads to resilience? So it's
Yes.
not my original thought. That's another strange thing about this field is like sometimes people think things are that they're like an approach. People ask me like my approach
Right.
as if it's like
Hmm.
my philosophy or something. And I'm really very much like collaborative and believe that there's decades of science here that we can call on. And
Yes.
I'm just maybe aggregating it and putting it in a memorable, 5 R's, but it's not my science.
Right. Right. That's so interesting. All of the idea, it's like, here's my 71-point plan for parenting. Like that, that would be very difficult for somebody like, hey, wait, when we were talking about, there was 32, I think that would be very helpful for this point. And so being able to do it in that 5 points kind of way is very consumable and understandable for people because it does, like, we know that the cure for overwhelm is nothingness, but with parenting, there's very rarely any time or space for nothingness.
Nothingness is so hard in parenting.
Yes, and it really is. And I love too that you mentioned this, and this was a question that I had wanted to talk about and meant and have you kind of elaborate more on. Like, you can pick this up now if you are pregnant, if you've got a newborn. I have a couple of of clients who have children who are like, well, I don't even know. I don't have to discipline them yet. They're too young. And I'm like, right, but it's a good idea for you to understand what your values are. Like,
Yeah.
before that time comes, so that when it does come and you feel that level of stress for the very first time that you have to discipline your child, that it's not, oh my gosh, what do I do? It's, I've already had this conversation. And if you have a co-parent or a partner, that you're having a meaningful discussion, perhaps a decision, though we talked about decisions earlier, ahead of time. But I like too, you mentioned like 13-year-olds. It's never too late to pivot, is what you're saying.
It's never too late to pivot. It,
Yes.
it's truly, truly a beautiful thing about relationships. And it's beautiful messaging for your kids if you have capacity to say, you know what? I thought about it or I learned about something and I want to try things a different way. I think
Mhm.
this will feel better for us.
Mhm.
So, or I want to like double down on what I've been doing. I feel really empowered and I feel like I got this.
Mhm.
I hope that I would rather people pick up this book and feel like, oh, okay, I'm not such a crappy parent after all, as it turns out. But now I
Sure.
have maybe some tools for moments that are a little bit like, oh, I just would like some tools. Um,
Mhm.
but ideally, I want parents to feel autonomous and like, I've got this.
Mhm. Yes. And I was curious too, how do you help or how talking about in the book, I actually said it this morning with a client, like perfect doesn't exist, yet people spend so much time chasing it. And how do you approach that? Letting go of perfection in parenting, letting go of everything has to be just so. What is the approach for that?
My approach for that, and the reason this is my approach is because I know that the low hanging fruit to get to parents, particularly mothers, is to say that it's bad for your kids to be a perfect parent.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I'm not trying to scare parents, but I do feel like it motivates parents to know when something's actually bad for their kids. And we
Yes.
know that it is a burden to have a perfect parent. Not that you could ever be perfect, but even, let's say you could magically be a perfect parent. How burdensome is that? Because the message then to your
Yes.
kids is you have to
And
be
this is
perfect.
expected of you too.
Yes. So
Yes.
I think every time you blow it with your kids and then make repairs, you are much more effective at helping them grow into worthy human beings that feel, or human beings who feel worthy. Of course, they're
Yes.
worthy, um, and can thrive very specifically because of all of your mistakes.
Gosh, I have had that conversation so many times recently where people have either recognized, they had parents who, my way or the highway kind of energies because I'm right, because I'm the parent. And so trying to unpack that in their own situations and how do I work through what does that look like? I'm not perfect, I'm not right. And I'll say that to them, right? Like if you can show your children what it looks like to make a mistake and what it looks like to make an amends, that is much better than I always have everything lined up and your clothes have all been washed and they've all, which actually I just remembered now that I said that, that I have laundry in the wash. So I'll do that after we get up. Right. But
But
like,
you're right. That's so much more burdensome. Like, who needs
mm,
that feeling when you grow up and you get out of the house and you're like, why can't I do all this? My mother did all of this. Ugh,
right.
that feels terrible. So I feel like that is the permission to be absolutely knowing that good enough is better than perfect.
Hmm. Hmm. And also good enough articulating that and not trying to put on the pretense of I'm
Yes.
perfect really does help. It's really interesting to me. I need to go back and Google the quote, but I think it was Topher Grace randomly was on a podcast I was listening to. I don't even know if anybody knows that reference, but he was saying like, isn't it wild to think that you are such a big part of somebody else's childhood? Like to really think when they are growing up and going on, and even if as you leave this earth or whatever, like that will all remain. And how do we navigate? It's such an interesting, it's almost like take it a day at a time situation because it might start to feel so cumbersome to think of all of that. But I've always thought that that was such an interesting, like, yeah, my choices will be the thing, body image, right? You think about growing up and somebody who
Oh,
is
yeah, that's a
constantly
good
talking
one.
about their body, and so it was very normalized then for you to grow up and like, well, of course I'm going to start looking at my body and nitpicking it. That's what adults do, right?
We do.
And so taking all of those things into consideration of our own therapy of getting rid of that and how do we shake that off ourselves, and also how do we stop presenting that perfection, that other thing
Yes.
to the children in our homes and around us too.
You know, my daughter said to me the other day, which was so ridiculous. If you saw, you can't see it, but I am not a like fitness buff, but I was I do sit-ups
Uh-huh.
a few times a week when
Yeah.
I'm exercising now that I have kids who are old enough, and it just makes life easier. I don't know that somebody with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old can have that bandwidth. But like you're just lucky to get a walk in. But and my teenage daughter said to me, she came into my room and I was doing like sit-ups and planks or something, which again, nobody can see me, but this, I'm soft. This is like bare minimum middle-aged, like menopausal thinking about uh fitness, not and like longevity. But anyway, she walked in and she's like, "You do sit-ups?" I am 49 years old. So she's like, "You do sit-ups?" And my children are teenagers. So it was just like after all these years, they never knew that. And I said, "What do you mean?" And my daughter was like, "This whole time, I thought that you didn't do anything and you just are supposed to have muscles." And again, I'm very soft. This is like a hilarious if you could see me, because these are muscles you would have to really use a magnifying glass to see. But I was so sad for her
Yeah.
because I guess I was like hiding things that are perfectly normal parts of. I'm probably was paranoid because of body imagery. Who knows why? But I just would. It's like a before bed habit. Um, but I was sad for my daughter who has been going around life thinking that some people just like have a muscle and some people don't. And that
Mm.
was a really weird. I mean, that's such a weird example because again, like I'm yeah, not a fitness person or a fit in that
Yeah.
way. I really just am like, ugh, I'm at an
Yeah.
age where I have to do things to not break. But even that, like even stupid things like taking hormones or using tampons or like things that you don't do in front of your
Yes.
kids because you're like, I don't want them to deal with this mess. I don't know why I got on all the women stuff, but they need to
I am
see
so
those
here for it.
messes.
Yes, but that's so interesting too, right? The normalization of the women's stuff, and it's really lovely. Like I just watched an Adam Sandler movie, and a girl.
Yeah.
Did you see it?
Yeah,
You're
because I
so
have
not
teenage
invited to my
daughters. Yeah.
my bat mitzvah, and the scene where she jumps in and her pad comes floating out, and it's quite full, and I like almost stood up clapping because the boys had said something, and every single one of those girls, they don't even really like this girl, but they were like
Like defended her.
defended her. It's so normal. What are you talking about? How dare? And I was like, this is what we need to see. Like even pad commercials now are using red liquid instead of blue liquid because we're showing people like we're not going to hide this from you anymore. Like we don't need to sense it like, oh, it's too much for you. Like everyone has blood. It's fine. It's not a big deal. And but you're so right about like the things that we do we don't even know about. Like your daughter's never said that before, like, oh, you just naturally look like that and I'm doing it wrong. But then all of a sudden in her teenage years, it's like, oh, oh.
Yeah, like, wait a second. So it's just, I don't know. I just think we have so many opportunities to show our kids that being a person is not just like you just you become an adult and it all fits in perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just think if you name that as something that is in the service of your kids, like you making a mistake, you working hard at something, you didn't just wake up this way, that
Yes,
it does help them
yes,
understand more that the expectation on them is not that you have to, and that's not about like, well, now my child's gonna have to exercise more, or they're gonna have to like be focused on feminine hygiene or whatever it is. It's more
right.
just like people are not living in this world just like you don't just grow up and it all falls into place. They just need to know like we know how to take care of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
but that
Yes,
doesn't mean we're perfect.
yes, absolutely. It's just, it's such an interesting way of doing things to be able to say like human. And I just, I'm trying to remember, and I'm gonna absolutely forget. I'm gonna try to remember to put it in the notes. My students last week actually taught the lecture, and they did a beautiful TED talk from Memphis. And I am fully blanking on the name, but I will get the link and put it in these notes. And the person was talking about not not striving for purpose.
Uh-huh. For purpose.
Yeah, for purpose, because
Uh-huh.
like what like when children are young, they, they go to school and they learn, and that's great. But then all of a sudden, school grades start coming and quizzes, and and then you go into the next grade and the next grade. And what do you want to be when you grow up? Which again, I'm always trying to be very specific. Like, what do you want to do for a job versus being, right? But trying to say like being in the moment, being present, enjoying the day. Not everything has to be towards some goal and some end, but that really has how we've got this constant drive and struggle to go, go, go.
Yes.
How do we help kids not feel that?
I think like the balance between, I also think it's like who are you and who are your kids? Because first of all, oh, I hear a dog that is about to bark. I'm so sorry.
It's fine. It's fine. Look, we are humans. We are not perfect. We have dogs that bark. Mine shook earlier. I'm not sure if it'll pick up on audio or not.
Um, but I was thinking some kids have a natural predisposition to wanting, like, drive, they're just driven.
Mhm,
And maybe they're looking at their parents who are super driven.
mhm,
And for those kids, you really want to back off of the high achieving, they're not healthy strivers necessarily. They
mhm,
might just be in, there's just like achievement pressure.
mhm,
And for some kids, they're totally unmotivated because they're looking for meaning
mhm,
to be bigger than it is and they're not finding it.
mhm,
And that's going to be a different thing. And for some kids, they just like don't care at all.
mhm.
And you're like not at all worried about achievement pressures. You're worried about the other side of it.
Yes, like
And
you do
so,
have to graduate high school.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think looking at your individual family and also like how are you and your family and what are the expectations that you have for yourself and all of that. But I think purpose is interesting because we definitely need it. Like we know that it's highly associated with so many positive things. But
Mhm,
I also think we overemphasize it with young children to the point where they're like, why don't I have purpose? What am I going to be? Who am I? Like I remember when my at the time fourth grader was really bummed because she's like, everybody in my class knows what they want to do with their lives and I don't know. I just don't feel
mhm.
like I have purpose. And I was like, okay, a message has been, there is a problem in the messaging here.
Yes.
So I think one of the things to do with all of that is to look at like what is your child's natural predisposition combined with your like just your family's goals, hopes, dreams,
Yes.
and then figure out, okay, if there's healthy striving going on, fantastic. And if there's something that feels like your value is in these outcomes, we have a problem.
Yes. Yes. And that made me laugh. All fourth graders know what they need. I changed my major in undergrad 7 times and graduated with a business degree and worked on Wall Street. And now I am a social worker. So, I
This
mean,
couldn't be more the opposite of Wall Street.
I, I actually was at Fordham and Occupy Wall Street was going on, and people came into our class at the end. They're like, "We're all going down tomorrow night for Occupy Wall Street," and I was like, "I still have friends who work there, so I'm just gonna like excuse myself, but I'm with you all in solidarity." But anyway, so I have lots of different thoughts on capitalism these days. But anyway, neither here nor there. But it's just really, that's a thing that I try to, I don't want to say I try to apologize to my children as often as I can, because that's the opposite of where I'm going. But like any opportunity that I have, I try to take it. I want them to know, like, not in a sorry, 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 like, oh, I didn't mean to say that. I meant to say this. Or, you know what, buddy, I don't know. Let's go look that up. Or I'm not perfect. I am infallible, or I'm not infallible. I don't have all of the answers, and that's really an okay place to be. Not to apologize all the time, but
Yeah. No, I think yes and
yes,
totally.
and yes, and yes, all of that. And because then, of course, the pendulum swings the other way of then they're constantly apologizing as well. So we don't want to go that too far. But yeah. And so that's been a really interesting thing for me, both in my practice, because I'm a clinician, but also in my own at home with the 2 and the 4-year-old, and where do we go with that, and what does that look like? And
Mm.
also, I do have to say, your spoiler alert about tantrums of childhood mirroring the tantrums of adolescence. Like, someone's gonna have to send me a case of wine or something. Or no, I
No,
know we're
you
trying to get away
know,
from the wine mom jokes now, but
I know they're getting, I guess they are getting, that's a whole other thing. But I do think that the good news about that is that you've lived it before.
Oh, true, sure. These are not uncharted waters.
They're not. They feel like once you realize, like, okay, the same thing is happening, just different, like over different things that might seem quite a bit more dangerous.
Mhm.
Um, it feels like less overwhelming.
Mm, that's very true. That's a
Also,
very
because you're
good way to put it.
handling them the same, like it's the same management system. You're
Mhm.
just maybe a little more fluent by then.
Yes, yeah. What are some, do you have any examples that are from the book or that come to mind?
Um, so an example of like the tantruming or responding to them.
Like how it kind of mirrors the
Oh,
childhood and adolescence?
yeah. So I think what happens is that when we are not pleased with a limit, we go into a stress response. Like whether that limit is you can't have a blue cup right now and you really wanted one, or
Yes,
you can't go to this party.
yes.
What you're hearing is, I'm under attack, I'm being threatened. And so
Mm-hmm.
you tantrum, whether that tantrum looks like a spinning out toddler or a teen that might be screaming at you. It's the same thing. It's a stress response.
Mm-hmm.
Your child is saying, there's an alarm bell that has gone off because I am under attack.
Mm-hmm.
And the body doesn't know the difference between, as you know, between real threat and imagined threat
Mm-hmm.
unless you have worked really hard to try to understand the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so our job is to remind ourselves first that they are not actually being threatened, that they're safe, that feelings are not dangerous. And so they're allowed to have all these feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a little bit, we meet them in a place that is able to help them co-regulate instead
Mm-hmm.
of being meeting them where they are, which is
Yes.
we're now setting our alarm bells off because we think
Mm-hmm.
that their difficult feelings are dangerous. So
Mm-hmm.
you can go one of two ways with toddlers that are tantruming or your teenager. You can panic in your own mind and think,
Mm-hmm.
why, how dare they? Why are they doing this? I mean, it's a little different with toddlers because sometimes you think they're cute and cuter, and so you might not get as mad. But I think after a while, you could find yourself feeling pretty frustrated
Absolutely.
or wanting to change the boundary that you set, but or the rule that you set because you just are like, oh, it's not worth putting them in harm's way. And in your mind, like harm's way is being really upset. And so
Mm-hmm.
in the book, I'm talking about like feelings are not dangerous. So what can we do to help you understand that feelings aren't dangerous?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're not necessarily saying that, you're showing them by not freaking out
Mm-hmm.
that your nervous system can completely handle this.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's under attack, you would you would set your alarm off. Like you would
Yes.
be there for them and you would turn into the parent bear, the mama bear or the father bear, the parent bear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You would protect them. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to tell yourself, no one's under attack here.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's safe, but these developing brains do not know that they are
Right.
safe. I need to get them to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to teach any lessons until they're
Mm-hmm.
safe. Once they're safe, we'll be able to go over all the
Mm-hmm.
wisdom that we have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's more of why I think there's the similarity because threat feels scary and
Mm-hmm.
when you have big feelings, you feel threatened. And our job as adults is to keep reinforcing that feelings aren't dangerous, that we are
Mm-hmm.
there for the feelings, but we are
Mm-hmm.
also there to curb and contain for safety purposes the behaviors.
Mm-hmm. That actually puts me to mind of that, the expression of if you don't need to panic on a plane until the flight attendants panic. And so
Yes,
like we're the flight
exactly.
attendants here where we know like, hey, it's okay. we are, we have some turbulence. Things are not ideal, but we're all safe and sound and secure, and it's fine. And then, like, I love what you said too about kind of the co-regulation that helps us then to be able to get to a space where the teaching and the learning can come later, but in that moment is not where we're going to find our most
Definitely not.
ideal
Yeah.
space.
I had a mentor once say, you can't teach a drowning child how to swim. And I was like, that is a terrible phrase, but very true.
It's accurate, but oh, to the heart.
Yeah, terrible. But like, even if you extended that, if your child was actually drowning, you'd get them the hell out of the pool.
That's right.
Like, you wouldn't have a conversation with them about it.
I actually, gosh, I hate this expression so much, but I love it. It's so perfect. You're right, right? Like, would you sit there and be like, no, no, it's okay. Just now use your arms,
Use your
make your
arms.
shots.
Okay, right. That's not when
No,
you're
you
teaching them
wouldn't.
treading water.
Oh my gosh. That's funny. I'm gonna have to start using that now, but with caveats of like
I know we
a
don't
little
want to.
aggressive,
Yeah,
but
it was such an aggressive, ridiculously, it was an old school professor, but I was like, I mean, there's a lot of truth to it. It's
dang,
just unpleasant.
unpleasant. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But so many truths can come to us in unpleasant packages at times. Amazing. So tell us again, it's all going to be in the show notes. When does the book come out? Where can we find it? All of the fun details.
Well, the book comes out January 23rd. It's in pre-orders right now. And so if you pre-order it, you get a chapter. There's a chapter on resilience that I wrote to sort of debunk the idea that people are or aren't
Yes,
resilient
love.
and focus on what are the skills that we can actually build and impact that are
Mm,
associated with resilience. And then also acknowledge that there's a host of factors we have no control over.
mhm.
So why not focus on what we can do something about? And so
Beautiful.
that's the chapter that you get if you pre-order. And then I'm doing a live Zoom to talk about that chapter and do kind of a resilience skills class and Q&A. And that's going to be October 24th.
Oh my goodness gracious. That will be wonderful. That's actually, interestingly enough, which we can go over, that's actually the day that this episode is meant to drop.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah.
Oh, we'll have another one.
Yeah, I was going to say, oh, well, we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll push it back, or whenever you need it to drop is whenever you need it to drop, and we can always push it around. But anyway, well, that is so wonderful. I'm so excited. I hope everyone run, don't walk to the pre-sale. That resilience chapter is so wonderful and so necessary, because it's the same thing as like telling a child whether or not they're good at math, or you're not a good singer, or
Yeah.
whatever that might be. And then we internalize that, and like, either you're resilient or you're not, and I haven't been
Terrible
resilient in the
message.
past, and therefore I can't be in the future, and that's just not true. And it's nice when we can hear people who know what they're talking about say that in a very meaningful way.
Yeah, I actually, this late mentor of mine, she was so strict with us when we would talk about resilience. Like, she would get mad if we would say, how can you be resilient? Like, she was like, get that whole idea out of your head,
Mm-hmm.
because the burden that it places
Mm.
on other people for being in charge of something that is not necessarily something they can be in charge of. But
Yes.
we do it in a positive way. Often we're giving all the credit to an individual who's bounced back in the face of adversity. But when we do that, we are not giving credit to like the mountain of support that human had to have had,
Yes.
that is just like not something we can pretend, kids cannot bounce back
Right.
the absence of support systems.
Right.
That's why they're there. That's why
Right.
we need, and the good news being the number one support system is just having one loving adult in your
Right.
life.
Right.
So that's the good thing. But she just was so strict with us about it. And
Mm-hmm.
she was a big resilience researcher.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to honor that. And
Yeah.
also, I think it's another one of those things like, let's unburden
Mm-hmm.
children
Mm-hmm.
and parents from this
Mm-hmm.
idea and just focus on like, how can we grow the muscles that are highly linked with it? Because I think it's about, when we want our kids to be happy, what
Mm-hmm.
we really are saying is, I want them to be able to come back to happy after having setbacks.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
that's all.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned strengthening the muscles too, even though we mentioned that earlier, and we're bringing it back a little bit. But all of the things that we're talking about here are muscles that you can work metaphorically, that you can work, and like that
Thank you.
response, right? I've even thought of that myself, and also Lexapro helps, but like in how I am recognizing, like, do I need to blow up right now? I really don't think I do. They did just throw a ball and hit me in the face with it, but I think I'm okay. Okay. And that sort of thing builds and grows. Whereas the
Yes.
first time a child does something that feels, I remember the first time my son hit me in the face with a wooden spoon. Luckily, his father was also standing right there, but I left the room crying. I was
Yeah,
like,
I'm
I,
sure.
it was such a triggered response for me. And so now it isn't, I mean, I might still cry if it hurt. It did hurt. But that is a muscle that you can build when you start to be more mindful and intentional about thinking on those things and how I want to respond and how I want to, and versus just saying like, I'm not resilient. So what are you going to do?
Right. I'm just built, I'm built,
Yeah.
with a weak temperament.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Dr. Pressman, thank you so much. What a treat. What a bucket list moment for me, if you don't mind me saying, to have you on my show. I'm so excited for your book, and I'm excited for everyone to get a chance to hear our conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. And to everyone out there, be curious, not judgmental. Goodbye.